Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Advanced Security for a Critical Age. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping items. First housekeeping item, everybody's muted and your video is off, but if you would like to ask the question, please feel free to use the chat feature or wait until the Q&A portion of the presentation and I can unmute you if you'd like. Second, this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you afterwards. And lastly, if you have any follow-up questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email solutions@diopath.com with your questions and we will get directed to the right person. And next, I would like to introduce our panelists. First off, we have Matt Briggs, our Director of New Business Development. Next, we have Corey Ayers, our SOC Team Lead. Next, we have Sean Troshasek, our Security Practice Lead. And lastly, we have James Melkor, our CTO. And now I will hand it over to you guys.
Thanks, Jordan. My beard game feels a little bit weak, and I know I've been heckled in the past about that. So maybe I'm not really a cybersecurity person. You know, this has been going since March of 2020. So Corey, Sean, I'm jealous. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As always, we appreciate you spending time with us. I know we've done a number of webinars in the past in regard to cyber, and we're excited to dig into this one because I think it'll have a little bit of a different look and feel. We're going to try to do, I'd say, more show and tell with a few demos, rather than presenting, slides for the duration of the webinar. So I'm excited, to be diving in and playing MC here. Again, my name is Matt Briggs. I'm the Director of New Business Development at Diopath. I've been with the company for 20 years now. So, as the title of our webinar suggests, we are going to be focused on cyber. And, I realize that cyber gets a lot of attention these days, and it certainly should. But we're also sensitive to the fact that there's some fatigue probably setting in. As it relates to cyber. So like I said, maybe doing some demos will change things up and get you guys intrigued about what we're doing over here at Diopath. So, as far as the title and why the title, Advanced Security for a Critical Age, it's more important now than ever to have enhanced cybersecurity capabilities to deal with modern day threats and modern day threat actors. As you guys know, the tactics, the capabilities get more and more sophisticated, and the stakes, are that much higher, given how leveraged technology is used in the private sector and public sector. A really great quote come out of Black Hat recently. I think it was last week. Many organizations still view cybersecurity as a technology problem that should be owned by IT. And I think there's this shift that's starting to happen where cyber risk is being understood as business or organizational risk. Certainly using the internet to operate can create problems that have nothing to do with technology. Again, as you guys know, legal, regulatory, financial, logistics, brand and reputational damage, and even we've seen instances of health and public safety issues that have come out of cyber attacks that have been successful. And so one note before we dig into the content, as we have attendees that range from ultra technical to not so much, we're going to lean more towards an elevated discussion. And then if you'd like to get into the weeds as far as the technology is concerned, certainly reach out to Solutions at Diopath or your appropriate Diopath resource account manager. So on to the agenda. What we want to cover today is maybe just a brief overview on Diopath, I promise I'll keep it short and sweet. I think a lot of you are oriented with who we are, what we do. Then we'll dig into our cybersecurity maturity model and just talk about philosophically how we go about helping organizations drive continuous improvement and get more mature. We want to touch on the concept of blue teaming, what it is, how it works, how you guys derive value from it, right? If you were to engage us, we'll certainly show you a managed extended detection and response demo. We'll cover the architecture. Corey's going to dig into that. And then, Sean's going to spend some time, really digging into red teaming. Again, what it is, value that's derived, and then we can show you a little bit of a demo within the portal. We've got some screenshots, and then we can roll into Q&A. But if there's any questions that you guys have in the meantime, you certainly leverage that chat feature and let us know. And then, as far as the objectives of the session, if you walk away getting to really a better understanding of blue teaming, red teaming conceptually, and honestly how those two things tie together, so that we can play off of different people, process, and tools, and again drive continuous improvement and shore up gaps sooner rather than later. I think then we've accomplished our mission. So let's talk a little bit about Diopath, quickly. So for those of you that don't know, Diopath has been in the IT outsourcing business for 25 plus years. We were founded in 1996, and if you look at a recent acquisition that we made, we can date back to 1989. So we've got a long standing in the technology space, co-headquartered in Houston and Chicago, round about 700 employees. So we've got some advantages of scale that we can bring to bear to the market. However, we haven't lost that high touch approach, leveraging service delivery managers, account managers, and we've got a whole methodology to maintain that high touch practice. The clients that we typically work with, private sector, mid-market, and enterprise, and then we do a fair amount in the public sector space as well. A whole multitude of services, I'll hit on that in just a minute, and a broad and deep bench of technical resources, including the capabilities to dispatch in most geographies in North America, and then certainly most major international markets. We're ITIL aligned, we're metric driven, aligned to SOC 2, HIPAA, and then the secret and top secret clearance piece. You may be wondering why that might be applicable to you guys. Just know that we go through authorization to operate audits every year. They're based on NIST 800-53. So as far as having policies, procedures, the right type of controls and resources in place, we've got all of that stitched up because we have to. So you guys can leverage off of that if you are in the private sector or the public sector for that matter. And then, as far as our security practice, 20 years in the game. So again, we've been at this for a while. We started by helping utilities align to a framework called NERC-CIP, so that they could get accredited and certified with the Department of Homeland Security. So we started in security, providing advisory and consulting services, and that stays true today. And we've done some interesting engagements in the federal space, used to working with highly regulated clients and regulated verticals. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of our security pedigree, and I'll talk about what we offer specifically in just a minute. And then as far as our service catalog, it's an eye chart. Know that we do everything from advanced security. We're experts in cloud. We have tech staffing capabilities or IT outsourcing, everything from full-time and on-site to fractional and remote, and anything in between. We've got a range of managed services, including service desk and NOC, and then we've got professional services and consulting capabilities. We are trusted by some of the largest organizations in the world. So you know that you can take some confidence in that. So this is our obligatory NASCAR slide. And then, as far as our clients in general, it runs the gamut. I think we're in 13, possibly 14 different verticals. And, the takeaway there is every client and every vertical is unique. And I think we've done a good job of customizing our solutions to meet the unique needs of our clients and, the verticals that they exist in. And then, as far as our government practice and public sector practice, we've worked with the likes of the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, and Veterans Affairs. So if you've ever been in a webinar or in a meeting with us as it pertains to cyber, you're probably sick of hearing us say that security is a journey and not a destination, but it is, and it's a never-ending journey that needs constant care and feeding, right? So if you look at our security practice, generally it starts with assessing, right, and understanding the environment. And then, after that's done, we can roll into, custom security awareness training and social engineering. And there's certainly great LMS tools out there like KnowBe4, Wombat, Symbol Security, Mimecast, that can augment your security awareness training efforts. And then we have capabilities I just mentioned from a virtual CISO perspective or advisory. So helping develop or tune a overarching system security plan, and security program. What we're going to focus on today is more of the ongoing technology and managed security services that are folded into blue teaming and red teaming. And there's certainly compromise assessments and incident response capabilities that we have as well. So I'm going to pause. Sean, Corey, anything to add so far?
Sean, I think you're on mute.
Or James?
It's the first time I've used the mute button. Forgive me for that. So if you go back just one bit to that slide, just real quick, I think today we're focusing on kind of technology and services. So that's just we've got a broad range, but we're really emphasizing that. So that's just the main thing I want to add.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. And then James, maybe this is something you can hit on. I'll tee things off. So we have a methodology in place, and we can certainly peel off and talk to you guys about the methodology and how to get there in driving continuous improvement and helping organizations mature their overall security posture. What we find in the evolution of security is a lot of organizations are at the defense in depth phase. And I would say it's relatively easy to get to defense in depth if you're able to create budget and justify why you're spending on particularly tools, right? So if you look at things like next gen AV and firewalls and IDS, IPS, anti DDoS, these are all tools, right? That there's a lot of great providers out there that you can implement and stand up. And so more often than not, when we engage, organizations are doing reasonably well at defense in depth. But when you go to take that next leap into detection and response or containment and remediation, which is the utopia, that involves implementing process controls, certainly having the human capital quotient, the people there that are going to help drive you in this direction, and that becomes expensive. Those resources are sparse, especially at the moment, And so it becomes more challenging. I think where we can help is we built that ongoing offering, right? That Corey's going to dig into and Sean's going to dig into in a little bit, that solves the people and the process piece. And then we happen to bundle in advanced, security tools, in the same service as well. So James, any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah. So when you talk about the defense in depth piece, right, where we see most organizations today, I mean, the big thing right there is I want to say there's a big push for tooling, right? And I think a lot of clients, see the marketing, hear the messaging from, cybersecurity insurance providers or what other sources or different sources that are out there, right? You can buy this tooling, you can buy this service, but at the end of the day, um, that gets you to a certain point. And really where the progression starts to happen is, okay, well, how do you ingest all of that information that's coming from those? Do you have the right organization to do that? Really, there's a governance component that comes into play, a management component, a continuous review and improvement process component that comes into play that really starts to feed into the detection and response and containment and remediation. Um, and that's really the big jump, is from the defense in depth piece to really the detection and response and containment and remediation is more of an organizational structure, right? Understanding who is doing what, how is it being reviewed, what do I do when something occurs, or if there's a service that's bought, what are the escalations for that service, and that is a major progression where I think a lot of organizations says, well, I have all these tools in place, but what are you doing to govern those tools to really understand the data, interpret the data, and action on that data, and what are the checks and balances put in place associated with those, right? And that's really where you start to see it really progress, right? That journey progress.
Yeah. Thanks, James, for that. Appreciate it. All right. So let's talk, and we're going to see this slide a couple times. And again, I know it's probably a little bit hard to read. We are going to send out a recording, so you can zoom in on this when you get that recording, and we can send a copy of the deck as well. But let's talk a little bit about blue teaming at a high level, and then we can come back to red teaming and purple teaming to wrap things up. But Sean, James, Corey, love to hear your take on this. But simply put, blue teaming is a combination of people, process, and tools that defend your organization, your environment, your network from adversaries and threat actors. And think of it like this: the blue team is your security operations center and folks involved with that block, contain, respond, and eradicate threats. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but if you haven't heard of the blue team or blue teaming description in conversations, and that's what it is at a high level. So Sean, any other thoughts on blue teaming?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sports metaphor is appropriate here. I think it's something that mostly everyone can relate to. We have just different types of teams that are out there. They play one another, and then often we have when we're on the same team and we want to get better, well, we'll have our defense and our offense play one another in order to get better internally. So in many ways, that's what we're talking about here. So from the blue team side, without that pressure from the opposite side, they're going to remain static and not ever improve. And unfortunately, you want to have that pressure internally. Otherwise, you're going to have it coming from the outside and then learn the hard way.
Thanks for that, Sean. So let's take a look at, because what we're going to do here shortly is roll into a demo of managed extended detection and response and get to that, that show and tell. As far as the architecture, excuse me, or the topology, there's a few things that we want to point out. Corey, I'd love for you to elaborate here, but if you look off to the left-hand side of the slide, that's your environment. And we start with looking at network traffic analysis of the inflows, outflows of data that are coming in. So generally, we like to deploy a network traffic analyzer at all of the points of egress, right, that you guys have. And then we certainly want to roll out, include as part of the bundle, the security information event management agent. And I'll let Corey dig into what that does and why it's important if you're unaware. But ultimately we want to get a view of what's happening. We do that through event logs, right, that are generated through servers, workstations, network devices, et cetera. And then you have next generation antivirus, that also performs ransomware prevention, and then endpoint detection and response, which you're probably hearing a lot of, especially if you're going through the process of renewing your cybersecurity insurance. It's a prerequisite now to pass through underwriting. And then there's things like vulnerability scanning, right, that you want to look after from the inside and the outside to determine if there's any gaps that need to be shored up. And then cloud integration, right? I mean, there's been a big move to cloud, whether it's public hyperscalers like Azure and AWS and GCP. Maybe it's leveraging SaaS providers like Mimecast or Proofpoint for email security. Maybe you have an EDR platform that stood up and you want to understand what's happening there. So getting integration so that ultimately you can give yourself and our team a 360-degree view of what's happening, encrypt that, push it back to a dedicated cloud collector that's stored for a year in case we need to go back and have a look at it. So the tools piece is important, but as important are the SOC analysts that are going to be looking at alerts, moving those alerts to investigations, and ultimately to incidents that really need to be digged in on if there is an active campaign. And then as far as process, we've got the NIST cybersecurity framework that dictates workflow. We've got the SANS Institute top 20 as far as incident response and what we follow there. So Corey, anything else to add before we talk a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK framework?
I thought you did a great job. A few things I'll add on is just the layered approach here, right? There's a lot of different threat vectors as you start to develop your enterprise infrastructure, whether it's network, cloud, endpoint users, and this sort of topology from a tool perspective just allows our team to gain that visibility, that insight, and that correlated information on, hey, who's coming in the front door from a network perspective? What are they taking with them? Who are they trying to call on? The log agent allows us to see that behavior analysis of who's logging on, what applications are they accessing, and then the EDR does a couple things from automated threat remediation playbooks, the anti-ransomware, deception technology, but also gives our team and kind of, referencing the previous slide, that remediation capability, that containment, that remediation action. And that's really, as Matt alluded to, that people process technology in an integrated fashion. It's really what we're going for with both the topology as well as the services that we provide around this.
Great. Thanks, Corey. And then before we flip it over to you to do a demo, I thought we hit on MITRE ATT&CK framework, and I'm sure some of you know of it, others may not. And I really like on their Twitter handle, the how they define it. It's a knowledge base for describing the behavior of adversaries across their life cycle. And what we want to do as a managed security provider is map our services as best we can to the MITRE ATT&CK framework so that there are less points that we can, be exposed, and our clients can be exposed if we're, mapping to the MITRE attack framework. So what we did, and we can certainly share this, if I can pull up the spreadsheet, is, we created a spreadsheet which, hits on MITRE attack framework, and then ultimately we've color coded it and, demonstrated this is how the service maps, whether it's part of detection, mitigation. Certainly there's going to be some scenarios where there's no coverage, or, but particularly early on, right, as a threat actor starts to, do a little bit of digging, we're certainly not know, if they're starting to, gather victim network information or org information. But as you move down the chain, the coverage gets stronger and stronger. So Sean, Corey, any other points here?
Yeah, just I like to give kind of real world analogies for people. And in this case, if we look at that area in red, that can potentially be a little bit alarming maybe, but really all that's saying is, let's say that you're a thief attempting to say break into a house or something like that. Well, you might drive around and let's say case the joint first. And that's what that red area is talking about. So there's just some things we just in general can't detect really. So for what that's worth, guys.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll just add in the MITRE attack, if you're not familiar with it, breadcrumb trail. That's how I always like to refer to it as, anyone, bad actors are trying to execute any kind of potential breach. No matter how good they are, they're leaving behind artifacts. They're leaving behind breadcrumbs, and MITRE attack allows us to identify that a little bit faster and start to correlate, okay, if we see a drive-by compromise, what are the potential next steps that we can anticipate, right? So it's trying to turn it from a reactive into, proactive from that blue team perspective. And we'll talk a little bit about the red team perspective as to how that enables us to better define our capabilities, our rule sets, our investigation processes as it relates to MITRE attack.
Great. So let us know if you'd like for us to share this with you. Happy to do it. So Corey, I think now's the time. Let's do a little bit of a demo. You ready?
Coming off mute, I am ready. Let me get this guy up and running. And share this screen. Perfect. All right. So we kind of went over the topology, the layered approach from network, cloud, endpoint, visibility. We're going to talk a little bit more about that process, right? With that, we're going to be getting a lot of different information across the entire infrastructure. And from there, alerts get generated. Activities occur. We have different rule sets built in, both from traditional behavior based to machine learning based, and we go through a specific process. And so I'm going to pop open this left-hand window here, and everything in our system starts as an alert, right? It's that base level, hey, take a look at this. Our team then picks those up, and where I'm at right now is a particular alert that allows us to do our investigation. You'll hear me talk a lot about efficiency from one screen. Let's be efficient in what we need to look at, what we need to do. And so this is a known malware detected. So it's pretty straightforward one. The benefit though that we want to build with that people process perspective is if we were just relying solely on EDR, we can pick that up, we see that, we terminate it. In this case, it was a ransomware event, it was quarantined, detected, great, right? We're protected against the risk. What we want to then provide as context is that additional investigation, right? Sure, we've prevented that, but rather than just moving on, we are digging into the analytics, we're digging into the telemetry, the users, the login sessions. Where did this threat come from, right? And this is part of what we call our recovery process. Like, yeah, we've protected against the risk. What do we want to do after that though? Rather than just saying, hey, we're good to go, let's move on. we need to continuously develop processes to make sure, again, in the future, this doesn't occur or we're prepared for it again. So this is more of a automated threat playbook, but the ability to, as an analyst, still keep track of those login sessions, those processes running, the services, pinpointing where did this risk originate from and what processes can we put in place in the future to ensure this doesn't occur again. Was this someone clicked on a link, they opened up an email that they shouldn't have opened up? Great, let's, we protected, let's go through security awareness training, let's push out some, phishing campaigns, do some education. Was this potentially more malicious, an insider threat? And that's really where MITRE ATT&CK allows us to see, where should we look? I'm going to pivot over to another example. This is more of what I would call behavioral threat coming from PowerShell. And I'll just give you an example of where exactly we use MITRE ATT&CK here. So this is a PowerShell script that was run to access credentials within this environment. And by using MITRE ATT&CK here, we can quickly see, like credential access attempts were occurred. So we don't have to continue digging. And again, going back to that efficiency, just automate some of that process for us. So we don't have to say, okay, there was a PowerShell script. Let's dig through that PowerShell script. Let's try and figure out what exactly they were trying to do with that script. As I keep talking, that time dwindles, right? But by using MITRE ATT&CK and by using this layered approach, you can easily see, okay, there were some credential access attempts. So let's go back to that computer and quickly identify the user accounts here that we may actually now need to either shut down, reset some passwords, continue our investigation and threat hunting around to ensure there's not an additional compromise. And then the final one, again, key piece here that as much as I love EDR, it's a critical piece of our stack. It's a critical piece of any business security strategy. It's not enough, right? And so this is a good example of being a little bit more preemptive in our discovery, where we see network traffic to a rare destination country. Not something necessarily in EDR is always going to pick up. And so by adding in that network traffic analysis, we're able to keep track of those internal communications and where are they going out to and how often are they going out to those particular countries. And allows us to work with you and your team to understand, hey, do we have anyone in Germany, in Denmark, in India? If not, this starts to become a little bit more suspicious and we can start to dig in to that destination IP, really understand the abuse record, the virus total score, is it a spam IP address or is it something maybe more malicious like a command and control server, a C2? Right. This again gives us that visibility, allows us to make those quick decisions. And then one thing you'll notice here is we do convert things into incidents, right? We treat them differently. And that goes back to just the overall process on how we start to differentiate ourselves. Alerts and events, all have their criticality level, but this is a good example where we're going to see a lot of network traffic to rare countries, and so the severity is generally low. But we're going to treat that from an investigation standpoint the same way that we're going to treat a critical alert. Where it becomes a little bit more intense, I would say, on our side is if we do convert this to an incident. For example, we don't have anyone in India. We should never be communicating with anyone in India, especially from an internal IP. Let's get this converted and go through that containment eradication process and start to go through, I guess, a full-blown incident remediation, incident management section. And then, of course, across all of this, we've been very much focused on the alert management, incident management process, the remediation capabilities of our team. We are seeing and collecting a lot of different data, and so we're able to get those insights as well. And this is a key piece for as a business to really understand. This is just an example of our successful failed login attempts. But the idea is you can get that visibility, understand where failed login attempts are coming from, internal, external, what executables are being used, what devices. More importantly, though, I would flip the script. This is extremely useful for our team as well. These dashboards allow us to quickly dig in. Should we see a PowerShell script being run from an admin account, obviously a huge red flag, we can very quickly, utilizing these dashboards, get the insight we need into the network, into the endpoints, into the user accounts to understand what else are they trying to do. And that's really the big thing where MITRE ATT&CK, these dashboards, the tooling, the training that we go through from a blue team perspective allows us to quickly identify, okay, where are those breadcrumbs leading us and how quickly can we follow that trail? And the time is money. Efficiency is always going to be king within this platform and within the blue team service. A lot of different capabilities. There's vulnerability management, as we called out. There's network, there's performance monitoring, there's incident management, there's deep diving into analytics. A lot of different areas. Always happy to spend time with you to educate you a little bit more on our process and how we actually use these tools in more of a real life incident management scenario. But I think the key thing from my perspective that I'd want you to walk away from is the integration of all three: people, process, technology, and being able to detect things early, efficiently handle that investigation, and then, as we called out earlier, be able to effectively contain and remediate that potential threat. All right, Matt. Anything else you'd like me to touch on at a high level within the platform or services?
No, thanks for that. And again, it looks like we've got a question or two, so I'll hit on that here shortly. But if there are questions about managed extended detection and response, certainly let us know. I guess I will add one thing as it relates to our service that I think is a key differentiator, and then James, Sean, love for you guys to chime in. But the human piece, the human capital piece is really, really important, right? For folks to go and do, those manual investigations and go out and do threat hunting, certainly be involved on the incident response side. As SOC analysts, we also layer on top, typically a dedicated security analyst as part of the service that gets to know you and your organization kind of inside and out. And generally what they're tasked with doing is looking at this dashboard, right, which is also available to you and your team, where they're performing tuning, they're certainly interpreting data, and then ultimately we get together on a bi-monthly basis so that we can help you understand really what's happening, right? And continue to add value, right? Whether there's chronic issues, there's vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. Here are certain areas that we can drive continuous improvement. So think of it as the equivalent of a service delivery manager. If you look at services like service desk or remote monitoring and management, NOC services, we've gotten some really positive feedback in incorporating those resources as part of the offering. So James, Sean, anything else to add here?
Yeah, I think, and just trying to add to what all you said there. I mean, what I found with blue team, red team, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There can be kind of a tendency to get static essentially, where we're not as dynamic as we used to be. And so really the purpose of that add-on is to make sure that we are keeping up with the pace of industry, but not only industry, but keeping up with what's going on internal to the organization, that we're understanding the context of that organization. So give you an example. Let's say that we have an account that's just gone haywire. It's logging in and it's got the wrong password or whatever, and so that can set off all kinds of alarms. And we can say, hey, Mr. Client, you maybe want to look at this, and we'll let you know. But often people get busy, so what we'll do in those meetings, we'll say, hey, it looks like we need to probably treat these service accounts. Let's see if we can't get those things tuned up a little bit. And then that way we can have a little bit cleaner alerts, and everybody kind of knows what's happening a little bit better. And so our clients have found those types of meetings to be tremendously valuable. But we'll go one step further often, where we'll start talking about some different steps they can do to kind of improve their architecture or their security, just from some of the findings that we get just through the incidents and alerts and so forth that are coming out of the platform.
Yeah, and Matt, I'll add to that. So really the way I look at it, and I agree with everything Sean's saying. I think just to add on is, there are some of those tactical things that we'll be doing, but I think the other critical part of that is the education, right? So there's a lot of services that are out there that provide, like SIM or SOC type functionality, but the interpretation of the data, what to do, how to guide them, how to educate our user. Those are the things that we see that are usually missing, right? It's a go read this article, go read this explanation, there you go. But there's not the human interaction piece of really being able to talk about what those things are, what we need to be doing, and strategize and move forward. The other piece of that is an internal kind of information loop, back into the team. So as we're having these discussions with our clients, we're delivering this information and they're asking questions. It also provides that feedback loop of how the service is working, what should we be doing different, what they're seeing as well, and that also flows back through that individual and back into the team. So I think it's pretty critical from that aspect.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple last topics here. Like, I think that this whole purple team operation, red team versus blue team, is, from my perspective, is critical. Yeah, we can, as a SOC team, as a blue team, try and cover as much as possible, right, within the MITRE ATT&CK, basic scenarios, common scenarios. But each network and each environment and each business use case is different, and that red team becomes critical. We'd rather practice against each other, to use Sean's example. Get butt heads, make sure that we're covering the different perspectives, and then we learn and adapt. So when we do get into game time, we're prepared for those nooks and crannies within your environment that maybe we weren't really prepared for initially, but that red team helped us identify that. And I think that's where this becomes really critical, is tuning those skill sets across the board.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I think there was a question, at least one that I saw earlier, about if there were kind of top of mind threats that were landing, and I believe there was even a response that people is the weakest link in the attack vector, and I think all of us on the panel would agree 100% that you have to elevate the security consciousness of the organization as a whole. Kind of first and foremost, that's low-hanging fruit. And then you certainly need the layered approach, as Corey had suggested, with tools and people and process to go along with that. One of the mistakes that we see in the field is this fixation and then over-reliance on just tools, right? And there's some really sophisticated tools that are out there. They're highly effective and efficient. However, back to the people are the biggest challenge. A good social engineering campaign is going to beat most of the advanced tools that are out there every single time. So, I think making sure that from the top down as an organization, everyone's bought into security and back to cyber risk is business risk. Helping educate those folks on your team that may not be up to snuff. And then Corey hit it on the head. This is probably a good segue into red teaming. So let's talk about that. Maybe Sean will show you a little bit of a demo. Let's stress test before there's an active campaign and hair's on fire and everyone's trying to figure out what to do. Let's stress test. So as far as red teaming is concerned, Sean, you beat me to the punch with the football analogy, so I'm a little bit bummed out that I can't talk through scrimmaging, but I think it was absolutely spot on. That analogy. As far as just security assessments, right? You guys are all familiar with the traditional approach. It goes something like this. It's performed every so often, once a year, 18 months, every 2 years. It includes pen testing, vulnerability scanning, architecture and configuration review, a controls assessment, based on what framework you're aligned to. And then there's a report, right, that, drops the first draft. Here's the current state of security, here's the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities, and here's a roadmap to fix things, including what's high priority, critical, level of effort. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have been involved in that and seen these reports. The issue is, if you're doing it every 12 months or 18 months, there's going to be a lot of blind spots and issues that surface over that time between assessments. And so that was fine a couple years ago even, but certainly with how the threat landscape is evolving and the big money involved in it now, and how leveraged again organizations are in technology, really need to shift the mindset from let's do this every so often and get a snapshot in time to we need to be doing this continuously. And I think that's where red teaming comes in. It's authorized. We'll just call it offense, right? Where we're validating what the blue teaming is doing, and Sean uses blue team validation quite a bit. So anyway, Sean, maybe you can talk a little bit about red teaming, value, and then if you have some slides to share or access to the red teaming portal, that would be great.
Yeah. So I think fundamentally, what we're trying to accomplish here is we don't want our processes and our knowledge base, if you will, to become static. Like that's what the situation we're trying to avoid. So the red teaming value is to inspire organizations and processes to keep on their toes. That's all we're trying to do. And I'm going to come back to a real world example. Sorry, guys, you'll have to forgive me for this one. But if you think about, we've got a police officer who is able to keep speeders in check for a whole city. A relatively small population can keep a city of millions relatively well controlled there. So similar thing, if you've got your guys in ops and maybe they like to write passwords down or just do other things that they know they shouldn't, they're going to think twice about it if they know that, hey, you know what? Someone's out there looking on our network. Like we've got a crew in our network that's looking for stuff like that constantly. And it just changes the game. We come back to kind of elevating the consciousness of the organization at that point, rather than just it'll be all right. I can write that password down. It'll be good. We've got these other points, faster security hole remediation and other things, but I think those are more kind of side benefits. But nonetheless, those are there. From a architectural and then process standpoint, it's fairly straightforward. If you can imagine just taking your traditional model, you've got a report. It takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to drop, give or take, and then you guys kind of think about the findings, and there's a lot of discussion. 6 months down the road, you're still kind of working your way through things. Maybe a year later, and sometimes. What we're trying to do is make this more of a DevOps type of process, even where here it is. It's embedded into what you're doing. You're going to try out different types of campaigns, different ways of testing. We're going to vary the methods of testing, and we're going to see if we can just make sure that everyone's paying attention for one. And the other thing, that we're validating our blue team side, that those guys are able to detect everything on that side. I'm going to show a demo here in a second. I'm going to wait till the next slide probably. But the way it works.
Let's go ahead and do it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see if we can figure out how to share a screen. This will be my first time to do this again, guys. Here we go. Share content. Hope that works. Oh, it said the wrong screen. Let me try that again. Share.
Sean, while you share your screen, we had a question come in. Maybe you guys can answer. The question is, for cyber insurance, what are the precautions that need to be in place to meet the requirements for insurance?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in while Sean's getting situated. Well, everyone's seen this, right? It's the ransomware supplemental questionnaire, and maybe it was 2 pages last year, 20 pages this year, and who knows what's going to happen, um, down the road. But I think that so the challenge is we've got insurers that it's almost like the tail wagging the dog. They're saying you need EDR, you need an incident response program that's documented, you need 2FA multi-factor authentication, and so they're still suggesting that it's sort of tools versus policies, procedures, the folks that are in place. So I think Sherry, it depends on the insurer, but I think ultimately where all of this is headed is the insurance carriers and brokers are going to be looking at completeness of the cybersecurity program. So we've had organizations that have come to us in an advisory role recently that said, okay, we need help answering the supplemental questionnaire so that we don't put a foot in our mouth and all of a sudden we're reducing the amount of coverage, we're increasing our deductible, or we're not getting a renewal in general. And so we're happy to help you guys walk through that insurance renewal process if needs be, but it's almost being treated like if somebody needed to be SOC 2 compliant or CMMC compliant, the insurers are tightening things up. So we can certainly talk more about that offline, but that's the answer I have for you right now. Sean, back over to you.
Okay, guys. Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. So I think we're getting short on time, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. But essentially, if you can imagine taking the traditional report model and let's just move that into a dashboard. And if you look on the, your attention is probably drawn here immediately, but let's just briefly look on the lower right-hand corner. So, we've got some different tests and things that are running here in the background. So let's just, there's some testing activity. And so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening there, just recent security testing activity. So that's something that the red team would do. But then you would also have, coming back to where your focus was probably initially drawn, you'll have a nice map of the vulnerabilities that have been identified by the security testing team. And then what you can do is work that into your own internal vulnerability management process, or we're happy to help you with that as well. But where you would have, okay, is this vulnerability still open? Have we closed this? What's going on there? Have we decided to accept the risk on that particular item? And then of course you can dive into the detail. And so let's just say that one of our flux capacitors stopped fluxing for whatever reason, and you want to get a little bit more information about that. Then we would have the ability to come in and say, okay, well, let's see what's happening there. Let's see if we can figure out if there's any comments that we can talk about. So you interact with the team back and forth. Ask some questions. Let's see if we can kind of get some more details if we need to. We need to get some screenshots. Let's upload those. And then what it does is at the end of the day, we can take all of this effort and then kick out a report where you would have that for your traditional model, where you need to bring that to the board, or whoever may need to consume that report. And then furthermore, you can of course download the vulnerabilities if you need to download all of those, and then import those into another system. Potentially you have a service desk system or something like that. One commenter says that they don't know what a flux capacitor is. I challenge that remark, but we'll do that another day. So that's how it works overall. This platform is built for red teaming. It's built for penetration testing. So you'll see that there's a section here for credentials. And so what that means is if we happen to get access to a system, this helps us manage those credentials internally, so that we can take additional levels of testing activities from whatever system we happen to gain control over. That's the vulnerabilities, the hosts, the credentials, some of the tasking activities, and I'm going to return back to the dashboard here in a second, and we'll talk through a couple more things. One of the things that we can do is we will deploy agents out to your environment, depending upon the scenario that we are trying to emulate. So as an example, one of our standard approaches is to go with Windows box that's just kind of sitting on your network. In addition, a Kali Linux box, if some of you may be familiar with that, that's just a standard penetration testing type of operating system. And so we'll use those two to simulate the condition of an unauthenticated user. So someone who's just walked in and parked something on your network and left it there and just want to have a good time. But alternatively, what we can do is work with you. We can simulate other conditions. So we've got some of our clients that've got, let's say, process control networks, or they've got, just different networks. They have different scenarios they want us to look into. And what we want to do is vary our vary our testing and just make sure that we're ultimately keeping everyone on our toes. That's fundamentally what this is all about. I'm going to pause for just a second. I need to take a breath. But any Matt, James, anything you want to add on so far?
I'm just looking at some of the comments. I'm not surprised that our CTO actually knows what a flux capacitor is. And Johnny Protas, you were not born in the 90s. I know that for a fact. So, James, Sean, anything else to add here on red teaming?
Just if there's anything that you leave with, just remember the whole idea is to help keep those systems admins and the blue team guys on their toes. That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'd like to just add the common theme, right? So as we talked about traditional assessments and then the benefits of red teaming compared to that, the common underlying theme is really what can we do to get the information in more real time and not in a static, not in really a static format, right? So that the days of just looking at static data once a year, even once a quarter, maybe, is really gone when it comes to security and overall IT maturity. So when you start looking at these type of things and having the tools and data feed into them in real time, being able to see where you're at, what you're doing as you make changes or as you progress, it's creating a continuous measuring or measurable for your organization. And honestly, that's just where security or even IT as a whole is going. So just that I just want to kind of point out that underlying theme, and really if you're told differently, from my perspective, security can't be an afterthought, and if the progress is just if you're told differently, that's really the wrong way to look at it these days. You have to look at things in more real time and more proactive and take measures to be proactive. So when evaluating anything from a security or technology perspective, you always have to keep that in mind these days.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up against it here. So Nicholas has a question. Maybe we can address this one and then adjourn. And like I said, please, let's keep the conversation going at solutions@diopath.com or with your appropriate account manager. But DDoS and denial of service, are we testing that? Sean, I know you talk about maybe shying away from that, and pen testing, efforts, just because we don't want to be too disruptive. But I'd love to, hear your take if we're doing pen testing.
We've worked with some clients just in arranging that through it's more of a specialty type of item in the penetration testing space. There are a handful of firms that are quite good at that, and so what we would do in that instance is just kind of refer you guys out to those. If you're going to do that type of testing as well, you really want to coordinate with your service provider on that one, because that's a pretty big deal. But we've helped coordinate those and helped move those along, and it's something that can be done. It's a little bit out of ordinary for what that's worth.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, really appreciate all the engagement. Thank you again for the time. I thought this was a really good session. That's it. We're at noon, at least noon central. So our time's up. We look forward to having you on the next webinar. Thanks for participating. Jordan, back over to you.
Matt, I just wanted to thank everybody again for joining the webinar today. As a reminder, the presentation and recording will be emailed out to you guys at a later time, as well as listed on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in any other Diopath webinars or roundtables, please visit our events page on our website and feel free to register for whatever you're interested in. Thank you all and have a great day.
You guys have a good day.